What's up, everybody? Brian Kaiser here. Just wanted to talk to you a minute about the fivefold. I've been preaching here at Love Revival quite a lot about the fivefold. Lord's been giving me so much about it, and I encourage you to go on our Facebook live streams to check those out. I've been talking about apostles. I did a message on evangelism, kind of reframing what does kingdom evangelism really look like. And then I've done 2 weeks on what is a prophet, what is prophetic ministry. This coming week, I'm going to really in depth cover what is a office of a prophet, or the gift of being a prophet that's described in Ephesians 1 and 1 Corinthians 12. And so anyway, I was just sitting here thinking about something. Well, let's just open up scriptures, and then I'll get into what I'm thinking about. So 1 Corinthians 12, verse 14. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. Now, you got to remember, in the context of this, and this can be in context of a lot of things. In the context of this, in 1 Corinthians 12, he mentions the gift of wisdom. He mentions the gifts of healing, workings of miracles, distinguishing spirits, tongues. But it is also mentioned here about the gift of being an apostle, verse 29, a prophet, a teacher, worker of miracles, possessing gifts of healing, tongues, interpretation. And he talks about desiring the higher gifts. So in context here, we're not just talking about some people are discerning of spirits, some people are better at administration. There's the context here of actually the fivefold, that there's people in the body of Christ that are prophets and teachers and evangelists and things like that. So just a little context. Verse 15. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not the eye, I do not belong part of the body, that would make it any less part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? As it were, God arranged the members in the body, each one as he chose. If all were a single member, what would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. Now, I'm going to go to verse 21 here in just a second, but there's two things I've been thinking about. In the charismatic movement, there's two issues I see with the fivefold quite often. There's more than that, but here's two issues that I think about. A lot of times we judge a person's zeal based on our gifting. What do I mean by that? I've known really, really evangelism-focused people that when they meet someone who's maybe a really gifted teacher, who's always wanted to get in the scriptures and read books and teach the scriptures, they can have a level of overt or soft arrogance towards those who don't have the same gift as them or the same focus. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, you can have somebody who's a really strong evangelist, and in their head, or even in the way they talk to people, it's like they don't look up to, respect, honor, ask questions, have a level of humility to say a teacher. Because the teacher's boring. They may not say that, but in their head they're thinking, I prayed for 20 people today. I led 2 people to the Lord today when I went to the restaurant, and teacher so-and-so, maybe this level of soft arrogance. It can be with teachers too, right? It can be with prophetic people, where it's just prophesy, 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 and all they can think about is that, instead of looking for the gold in the gift that someone carries and how zealous do they carry that gift. We should be looking for zeal for how well your neighbor carries your gift. We should be looking for zeal and how well they carry their gift, if that makes sense. So I'm apostolic, so I believe personally that apostles should really be kind of well-rounded in all the other 4 graces, the 4 giftings. And So, I functioned as a pastor. I pastored a church in Roanoke for 2 years. And I was very evangelistic starting out my walk, and still am. And if you know me, I love theology. I'm a total nerd. And I'm pretty prophetic, and I've had quite a few very dramatic prophetic experiences and can hear the voice of God. And so for me, when I want to see how well someone is functioning or how zealous they are, I don't look at them based on how apostolic are they, because that's who I am. I identify and say in my heart, that person's an evangelist and they're functioning it out really, really well, right? I don't try making them into being in my image. My goal is to find the image of God in them, right? And pull that gifting out. They're part, there's many facets to the image of God, but one of the facets might be that they're an evangelist. Jesus was an evangelist, an image of Jesus on their life. And my job is not to try making them a prophet or making them prophetic or making them an apostolic person, because that's who I am. My job is to pull out who they are. And I've seen a lot of times where, you'll have a leader of a church and they may have like a really strong gifting for, let's say, the prophetic. Well, then what do you know? Everyone in their culture is just like little robots to look like them and to all be prophets. Well, it's cool that there's like some impartation going on, some genuine impartation, but at the same time, like, I find it unlikely that God's going to raise up an entire church of all prophet people. He needs to find, there's some evangelists in the midst, but they've just been wired to be, automatically prophetic people, right? Or and evangelist people. I mean, there's churches that have been started by evangelists. And the whole church are just a bunch of evangelists running around, and that's not healthy. There's a lot I could say about this, but at the end of the day, we need to pull the gold, pull the gifting out of people that they are, pull the image of God out of them, not the image of us, right? Two, one of the other fivefold flaws that I've seen in a lot of cultures is you got to know your realm of grace. Paul, in Ephesians, says that he had a realm of grace, a realm of influence, and the Greek word is metron. It literally means a realm of authority that you have. And I've seen people where they're clearly a prophet, right? And they will get a little too high and haughty, and will then begin trying teaching theology. And then they teach like rank heresy, or just like clearly don't know what they're talking about. Evangelists are really bad about this sometimes. I won't name any names, but I've seen some of the, really well-known charismatic evangelist people who are awesome at what they do with evangelism get into theology and start, talking about end times things that they have no idea what they're talking about. They're not, educated on or anything. They just regurgitate something they saw on Facebook or, read one verse and decide to preach it. And it's like, man, like, imagine, talking about what it says here in 1 Corinthians 12. And my first thing I talked about, like, Paul pretty much just says it, like, what if an ear is like, man, why can't you hear, nose? Like, we wouldn't want to do that. That would be unfair. And then two, we wouldn't want the ear itself to begin trying to being a nose, because then who's going to hear? And all of a sudden the gift is mixed up. That is the ear to the body. It's a gift to the body. And so we've got to function in our lane. I've seen, that was really one of the big issues, I believe, with the Voice of Healing movement in the 50s and 60s. Some of those guys, one in particular, who I really admire, was William Branham. And it seems that he definitely got off track later in life. It really seems that he was a genuine evangelist and maybe a prophet, but he later in life tried being a teacher, and it's just not who he was, and he got into some really, really funky things, But we really need each other. And thirdly, the other thing I think I'd mention too at the fivefold is, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, but we've got to surround ourselves with all five. If we just are all ears in our circle of relationships in our church, things get weird. It's kind of like inbreeding or something. Like, it just gets kind of weird. Like, we really need all of the giftings, all of the graces to grow us up. And, I find that there's personality traits that some of these giftings hold that you in a different gifting might actually be annoyed by. But it's actually a good thing because it sanctifies you, it humbles you. Take apostles, for instance. Apostolic people, we want to run all the time. We just want to build, and really go after things, and that's awesome, and we need that. But that unbridled all by itself can absolutely lead to destruction. But I find that teacher people, a lot of times they kind of move a little bit slower, but they like to build a really strong foundation, really strong frame for what God wants to do in a community, in a church, in a ministry, a movement. And so apostles, like, they surround themselves, if they only surround themselves by other apostolic people, they're just going to build and run and maybe not use the most wisdom sometimes. But teachers are really good at coming in and saying, hey, let's do this in a wise and wisdomful way, right? Again, apostolic people can sometimes be very, conferences and church and all these kinds of things. And sometimes, not always, like, I'm really evangelistic, so I don't really have this issue. But a lot of apostles aren't very evangelistic, and prophets are really not evangelistic a lot of times. Not always, but a lot of times. And they need evangelists around them to get out of the churchy religious mindset and get back in the world and get down in the gutters with the rough people, But I just encourage you, number one, let's honor people for where they're at, what their gifting is, who they're called to be. Bob Jones was a really great example of this. Bob was a prophet through and through. Dude was a prophet of God. I think he's one of the most prolific, profound prophets the church has ever seen in 2,000 years of history. And, the guy never wrote a book. He never tried talking about theology. He never tried planning a church. He never was an apostle. He never stepped outside of his lane. He was a prophet of God, and that's what he did. Lou Engle is a great example. Lou is kind of a different styled prophet than a Bob Jones, but Lou's a prophet of God, and the man's always stayed in his lane. He's never tried planning a church. He's never tried stepping outside of his metron, his realm of grace, right? Who else is a really good example? Billy Graham was a great example. Billy Graham was an evangelist. He was through and through an evangelist. He didn't try being a theologian. He wrote some books, but they were very simple. I've read a lot of Billy Graham's books. They were very simple. They were very evangelistic. They weren't doctrinal. He wasn't stepping into a different realm than he should have. And I think that's so important. So anyway, love you all. Hope this is encouraging. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to comment them, share this video, like it, and hope to do this again soon.